I can see clearly now the rain is gone. Do, 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 do. I can see all obstacles in my way. What you resist will persist is a saying that you'll hear a lot of people say when it comes to spirituality in general, manifesting, or just life in general. What you resist will persist. So this means if you have a problem with anything, if you have any resistance to anything, an aversion to something, it will persist in your life. It will keep coming back in your life until you've learned what you need to learn from it. And today I want to share with you a little something that I do when I find I have resistance to something that I know I don't need to be resisting. First of all, hello, and welcome back. I'm Ann Blackwood, your Silicon Valley Sage Sister, here to bring consciousness to the forefront of your daily life to make life a little kinder and simpler, and I hope I can do that for you today. Secondly, to kick this off, I want to say that this little tip that I have for you is something I do when I'm resisting little things, not really big things. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just want to preface this with that. So when I find that I have resistance to something, I have, any bad feelings towards something whatsoever, I ask myself, can I do more of this? Can I get more of this? And ask myself as well, why do I feel a resistance to this? And sometimes I can tell myself, and sometimes I can't. But it's important to, at the very least, figure out why you have resistance to something. Because if you're going to bring more of it into your life, you also want to make sure that you especially want to make sure that it's not something that's going to harm you by bringing more of it into your life. And that was what I was getting at there, was that, I'm not talking about like, I really dislike this guy, but he really likes me, so I'm going to go out with him because I'm resistant to him, so I should make him a part of my life. That's not what I'm talking about. I'll give you an example of something I did do this with that I actually talked about in my video for Patreon the other day. Which is like, for instance, as someone who grew up attached to the identity of a witch and witchcraft, I developed an aversion to Christianity and to the concept of God. And because of this, anytime someone talked about God, talked about anything Christian based whatsoever, I felt these bad feelings, these problematic feelings towards it. And I was realizing it didn't need to be that way. And this is all too common for people who are heavily Christian faith-based to have an aversion to people who consider themselves witches, and vice versa. And it just doesn't need to be. And that's why I love spirituality so much, and why I consider the prerequisite to spirituality individual religions, because they get stuck in this feeling of it's got to be this way and no other way. And until you move into that understanding that they're all the same, and they're all talking about the same thing, and they're all bringing something to the table as parts of a greater whole, that have something to offer. Until you get to that point, you haven't moved into spirituality. Otherwise, you are still in an individual religion, denomination of some sort. So I, as someone who used to identify as a witch, now I realize that I'm not anything other than me. I've talked about that before many times. You know, I do things, I am not things. So I realized that, like, I had no reason to have an aversion to anything Christianity. And actually, often, people that I know who talk about the concept of God, they're not talking about the anthropomorphic dude in the sky. They're talking about a source consciousness sort of entity. So what I did was, when I say God, source, spirit, cosmic consciousness, you guys hear me say that all the time. And at first, and I really only have been doing this for like the last 2 years. Even like two and a half years ago, I still had that aversion. Even though I didn't identify as a witch anymore, I still had this aversion to Christianity for all sorts of reasons. Especially because, you know, I had very, very bad interactions with people who consider themselves Christians. And just assumed that anybody who was talking about God, using the word God, meant the anthropomorphic dude in the sky. So not only did I start saying God, source, spirit, cosmic consciousness, but I forced myself to put God at the beginning. You know, I would desperately like try to switch it up and say, you know, source, spirit, God, God's, you know, spirit, source, God, spirit, God. So you get it. And so I started forcing myself to put it at the beginning. God, source, spirit, cosmic consciousness. And now I just do it habitually. Like, now I've like done it so much that, to me, saying God, source, spirit, cosmic consciousness is the best order in which to say it, sort of poetically. I think it aesthetically sounds the best, because I've tried it all the other ways: source, God, spirit, cosmic consciousness, spirit, source, God, you know, I've tried to say it all the ways. And so, you know, now it's my habit: God, source, spirit, cosmic consciousness. I think that sounds the best. Even though I don't believe in an anthropomorphic guy in the sky, I also understand that not everybody who uses the word God, the big G God, means an anthropomorphic God in the sky. There are a lot of people that I know who are spiritual people who use the word God to describe a source consciousness entity. And we can do this with all sorts of things. So like just the other day, there was a video that I saw kind of go by, and I was like, ugh, that gave me sort of a bad feeling. I'm gonna watch it. And I do this with all sorts of things, because the more and more experience and understanding we can gather, the less we have aversions to things, the less things we will be resistant to. Now, again, like I said, I'm not saying do this with anything that might possibly hurt you as a result of you immersing yourself in it. You know, you can have resistance to things, and that's telling you that you need to get away from it, not get into it. And this is why I do one-on-one sessions more than I do courses at this point, because it's on such an individual by individual basis. But for the most part, you're going to be able to tell. Is this something small, you know, like politics? You know, I used to think that anybody who was conservative leaning or Republican leaning was gonna be uptight, have to be Christian, all sorts of things. And as I've learned from getting deeper and deeper into what people would consider conservative circles these days, because I'm in both very liberal and very conservative circles, because I want to experience it all. I want to understand it all. I no longer have resistance to either side. The only things I have resistance to on either side are the things that I disagree with morally. And even then, I can have conversations with people about those things and have them be very constructive, productive, and friendly, because when I get into conversations with people, I make sure that they're people that can handle having a rational debate without it getting personal, and also because I've made sure that I can do that I can ask questions and dig around in things that seem concerning or bad to me, because I don't take it personally, because again, I am not things. I do things. And I know other people aren't things. They do things. So any disagreement we may have has nothing to do with how we feel about each other. And we both know this. It's us digging in to explore like a grand adventure. So I want to encourage everybody to start looking at the things that you resist and ask yourself, if I was to spend time doing more of this, immersing myself in more of this, would this harm me? Or is this something that I could build a little more bandwidth for, a little more understanding of, and then I wouldn't have resistance to it at all? At a minimum, you might not like it, but you at least won't resist it. You won't have bad feelings towards it. I'm not jumping in to church every day or once a week. I'm not out there, searching out the born again revivalist or whatever they're called, evangelist Christians. I'm not like submerging myself in that. But now when I come across it, I recognize, because I don't avoid it, that we actually have a lot more in common. Like, when I used to go on Clubhouse, because when it first came out, I eventually ended up having to not go on Clubhouse, because I would just get so immersed in these conversations that I was having with people that it could take up 4 hours of my day, and I didn't have that time anymore to be giving to that. I was fortunate enough that when I first started getting on Clubhouse, I would have the time, because I was in a transition period between clients, because I used to do session cycles where I would do 3 and 6 month session cycles, taking in new and old clients secularly. Now I just have a certain amount of spaces open, and they open and fill as they open and fill, rather than effectively taking clients that I already have and kicking them out and bringing them back in. That seemed a little silly to me. But that was kind of the way I was looking at it. So that was why it seemed silly to me. Anyway, I really enjoyed Clubhouse, because I would get into these conversations with people, and myself, someone who was heavily spiritual, someone else who was totally atheist, and someone who was born again, awakening Christian, we would all be on the same side explaining our point of view to someone else on the opposite side. And that was what was so amazing about the groups that I got into in Clubhouse, was you could take these massively different people. Like, massively different. Like, culturally, spiritually. You know, you would take the three of us or the two of us, and we would be able to explain from two very different perspectives why we felt the same way. And it was because at the end of the day, we did have some core beliefs that were the same, even though where we were coming from with them were different, or where they were coming from within us was different. They resulted in the same belief and the same prescription for life. I don't know. That didn't work out the way I wanted it to. What we believed should be ended up working out the same, even though we were coming at it from two different perspectives. This is the amazing thing that you can discover when you don't resist things for their superficial outer covers. It's not judging a book by its cover. Plain and simple. So, yeah. I want you to start asking yourself, when I feel resistance to something, is it because this is telling me I need to actually get away from it? Or is this because I have some sort of assumption that I've made about it that's telling me it's bad? Because, like I said, again, you don't want to be going headlong into things you have resistance towards, because it would actually cause you pain to be around them. Like I said, like you have a guy that's hitting on you or a girl that's hitting on you, and you're just absolutely repulsed by that person because you're not meant to be with them. I'm not saying go hook up with them just to see. There is a healthy form of resistance that is a warning that you shouldn't do more of that. But there is also very superficial, like base level resistance to things that we experience that is letting us know that we could be more open. And the very last thing I want to say about this is sometimes, and I was kind of talking about this in the self-care thing as well, sometimes we will, out of a laziness or out of some sort of mental gymnastics justification, sometimes we will, in the name of self-care, tell ourselves it's okay not to do something or to do something, when in fact we know we should be doing the opposite. But for whatever reason, we excuse ourselves. Like I said in the other video, this happens a lot with spirituality, where people will start doing what they call spiritual bypassing, where instead of actually in a healthy way dealing with something, they'll try to, like, in a roundabout way, avoid it entirely. I want to make sure that everybody knows that there are times in our lives where we absolutely will feel resistance to things, where it's the growing pains. I talk about this all the time because it's so important to understand. We will feel resistance to things pushing out of our comfort zone in good ways. It's a very similar thing to when I talk about that. Like, is this a growing pain that I need to push through? Or is this actually a pain that's a signal to stop? A month and a half ago now, I got a really big wake-up call when I just smack hit a wall. Like, just bam, hit a wall. And that day, I discovered what a self-care day moment actually looked like in terms of what I needed to experience to actually justify to myself not doing things. And I spent 2 days not doing anything because I needed to recover from the stress that I was experiencing. And I haven't felt stress like that in a long time, because usually all of the tools that I have, I'm really good at using. But this particular time, it wasn't that the tools that I had failed me, it's that I stopped using them. And it was because I was getting caught up with a circumstance that was happening in my life that I did not expect, for a handful of different reasons. But what was really nice about this was that it showed me, if I don't feel like this, it's not extreme enough to justify letting myself slack off, basically. Everything I had been doing up to that point was slacking off, not giving myself care. So, you know, there are a lot of people in the spiritual community who will just be like, accept yourself as you are. No. No. We are meant to love ourselves for who we are while leaving the door open for growth, change, and expansion. So yeah, don't beat yourself up for it if it didn't happen, but damn well make sure it happens next time. Allow yourself to feel a little bit of that discomfort, a little bit, and then release it. Honor it, as I say, and release it. But don't, the biggest thing that I see people do wrong, and I will literally use the word wrong, is they, out of this compassion, don't push themselves to grow. And that's where this whole concept comes from. Recognizing that there is resistance we feel as we grow. And that is a good resistance. And that is something that we want to push out of. Move beyond. And one of the ways we can do this is by getting ourselves to do or experience whatever it is we're resisting. And therefore we will no longer resist it, because the more we do something habitually, the more it will become a habit. Like me and using the word God. You know, even the idea of prayer. Oh my goodness, I cannot even begin to tell you guys. Like, I would find a way to use the word meditation or a mantra or affirmation instead of the word prayer, because I had so much resistance to it because it was Christianity, like, associated. Silliness. Pure silliness. Like, these are the kinds of things that we don't need to be resistant towards. And this is like all of what my spirituality 2.0 speech detox, feelings detox is all about, that I just put up on Patreon for Ascending, Sanctuary, and Awakening tier members, is just, once you get to a certain point, it's not about the words, it's about the feeling. And this applies to so many different things. And if you want to learn more about that, go check out my Patreon. But yeah, there are so many things that we find ourselves resistant resistant to on a daily basis because we identify with things, we have attachment to things, and therefore we can't experience the vastness of life in a happy way because we're quite literally choosing to feel badly about something, towards something, have bad feelings because something's in our life or around us or pops up. It's a choice. It's a choice. And you can either choose to hold those bad vibrations, or you can choose to break free, baby. Break free. Do it. Do it. Because you do not need to be shackling yourself with all this resistance. Yep. Instead, you can either remove it or use it. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you guys for joining me for another video. Don't forget to subscribe, like button stuff, all that good stuff. If you haven't already, don't forget to check out the links in the description. There are links to my Patreon where I have so much good stuff. So much good stuff. And for such a small amount of money every month. Because I want everybody to have access to these things. Like, these are teachings that I know people charge hundreds and thousands of dollars for to get access to. I don't want to do that because I want you to have access to it now. Because it takes a little while to absorb it. And that's another reason why I realized I felt silly charging large amounts of money for something. Because I know with my level of knowledge how long it took for me watching it a couple of times to truly start to understand and absorb it. And I want you to have all the time you need to take in all of these teachings and be able to actually grow from them rather than feel like rushed or constrained. I never want money to be the barrier between someone and my teaching, because these are amazing teachings that I've collected from so many places and brought them all to one place. Like, from what I've seen, the best of the best. Like, what are the most important parts, and bring them all together from so many different places. Because no one person does this. You've got a little bit about this over here, a little bit about this over here, a little bit about this over here, and I'm bringing them all together. Like, that's my life's work. I lost my part-time job in the end of 2019, and I realized, like, this happened for a reason, because I am supposed to be doing this full time. I was just at the point where my in-person business was finally full-time after building it up for 5 years, my in-person practice of doing counseling with people. After 5 years of that, through just word of mouth and a couple of flyers, I had built up to full-time. And so, you know, I took me not being able to do this other part-time job anymore as a sign from the universe. It was time to go recognize that it was full-time and come online. And so, you know, I've been doing all of this stuff for a very, very long time. You know, you'll hear me talk about how I started studying a bunch of different religions and spirituality when I was, like, my journey with that started when I was 9 years old. And I have been dedicating myself to it for a very long time. But I recognized 2 years ago that it was time to do nothing but that. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So I have what I can teach people without having to get specific on my Patreon. And if you are really ready to get specific, and you are really ready to heal, grow, and expand your consciousness, I want to help you do that. I would love to have you. And you can use the links in my description to sign up to work with me one-on-one. I do still have spots available for that. So all the links in the description, go check them out. And of course, as always, may the energies you serve you well. And let's keep making our way through.